Everybody, welcome back to the continuation of month 2 of the Echo Leadership Podcast. My name is Andy Wood, and I'm your host. I'm so glad that you're joining us again to continue to improve as a leader. Our goal here with the podcast is to help you become the kind of leader that the people on your team want to follow. If you didn't get a chance to listen to the last episode, we want to encourage you to go back and do so. We started our conversation talking about the subject of leadership credibility. And I kind of built the case that during crisis, some leaders are really earning credibility and other leaders are destroying credibility. In fact, in 20 plus years of leadership, I've noticed many leaders make decisions that have completely destroyed the way the people on their team see them and the respect that those around them have. It's really hard to lead people who you don't have their respect. In last episode, one of the big ideas we said was that it takes decades to build credibility and days to destroy it. And credibility is the currency of leadership. People have been throwing around the phrase cash is king. I would rather have credibility than cash. Now, I would like to have them both if I can. As an entrepreneur, a CEO, or a leader, we all know that revenue is a really big deal, but currency of leadership being credibility, that's a bigger deal. And so we're going to get into 8 practical ideas of how you can build credibility as a leader. Also, if you'll go to our website, Echo.Church/leadership podcast, you can find a guide that will dial in more of what we're talking about today. I had several people say it's a lot of content, and I get it. It's a lot of content. That's why we put that there, so that you can download it. You can be walking, running, jogging, lifting weights, going through this while you're driving. That's why all those notes are there, so that you can refer back to it later with the most important points. So here are 8 ideas for destroying your credibility. 8 easy ways to destroy your credibility. Negative things that you can do that will destroy your credibility as a leader. Number 1 is this: to be inconsistent in how you treat people. So much of your leadership, you're interacting with people who support you. Perhaps there are people on your team that you lead up to. There are others that you're co-workers with. And it's interesting how often you'll find somebody and they treat people different. People who they need something from, they'll be kind to, and people they don't need anything from, they'll just berate. Or people that they pay their paycheck, they won't treat them the same way that they treat their boss. And it's so important as a leader. The people on your team are watching how you interact with different groups of people. I remember one time I was in college and I had gone through this summer program. There was this one leader. I really liked him and really respected him. I wanted to be like him. He was probably 7, 8 years older than me, which was a lot at the time. And one day we went to the grocery store together. We were getting supplies for our kind of dorm room that we were staying in. And a guy walked up to us in the parking lot and asked for some money. And for whatever reason, this youth leader of mine just started blasting this dude who asked for money. Now, I'm not saying that he had to give him cash, and I don't know what the guy would have done with the money, but the leader's response totally changed my perspective on him. I never saw him the same after that one interaction with the homeless guy in the parking lot at Safeway. It changed the way I saw him. And I have had a lot of times in my life where I am seeing how I'm interacting with people, and sometimes I get that check of like, well, am I treating this person differently because they can't do quite as much for me? So I'm learning as a leader that I have to pay attention to how I interact with people on my team who report to me, our board. And there's some important parts of this that we can unpack. Like, of course, we're not going to give everybody equal amounts of time. You're not going to give everybody on your team equal access. There are people on our team that I haven't had meetings with in years. There are people on our staff that I hardly ever spend time with. We have a big team. But the important aspect of this is around values. And it's the significance of how a person is treated by the organization. So I want you to think about 3 aspects of your words that you use. It's number 1, what you say. Number 2, who you say it to. And number 3, when you say it. I had a leader on my team who approached me and said, hey, Andy, sometimes I'm in a closed room with you and we're diagnosing problems and you're talking about people and capacity issues that they might have. I feel like you're talking about them in a way that's not helpful or beneficial. And that conversation was helpful for me. It made me think through. There are some people that probably shouldn't be a part of those inner circle conversations. And then in addition to that, I need to check myself. I should always be asking the question, is this conversation helping solve the problem? If I'm having a conversation with somebody on my team and that conversation is not leading to the next conversation that needs to happen for that person to be trained, or the corrective conversation that needs to happen, or perhaps the encouragement that leader needs specifically to grow in an area, the first conversation should always be helping the second conversation. If it's not, that's a problem. So here's some other things to wrestle through. How do you treat people who can do nothing for you? How do you speak about people when they're not in the room? The goal that I have in leadership is that the people who are closest to me would respect me the most. And this would be true of family. This would be true of the people on our executive team. I want to treat people in a way that the more they're around me, the more they respect me. So some really practical things like please, thank you, being grateful for people who sacrifice for your leadership. If you're on a platform, a lot of people are sacrificing for you to be on a platform, for your role in the organization, and just saying please and thank you. A mic test, like I'm often on a microphone, and the thing I have to wrestle through is if the way I treated people were broadcast on a microphone or broadcast through a microphone and speakers, would that conversation gain me more respect or less respect in the eyes of the people? So how you treat people is one of the most important aspects of your leadership in terms of building credibility. That's number one. Number two is to make follow through an afterthought. Henry Cloud, one of my favorite leadership authors, says that people leave a wake behind them. And he said that like a boat, there's a wake that follows you as a leader. And it follows you in two areas. Number one, relationships. We just talked about that. Number two, responsibilities. And there are a lot of leaders who people will say things about their performance when they're not in the room. In fact, everybody on your team is talking about you. The question is, are they talking about you when you're in the room? So I want to encourage you to do a couple of things. First of all, to monitor the commitments that you make as a leader. I think about this a lot when people on the team ask me for something. A lot of times they'll have a timeline in mind and I'll have a timeline in mind. And the natural tendency as a leader is to want to overpromise what you can do because you don't want to disappoint that person on the front end. But what I would rather do as a leader is I would rather disappoint somebody with the timeline that I give to them. So I will say, hey, would it be okay if I got it to you by next week? And in my mind, I know I probably can get it to him by the end of this week, but I'm saying that because I want to set the relationship up for success. So every time I underpromise and overdeliver, I'm putting points in the bank in that relationship. But every time I overpromise and underdeliver, I'm withdrawing from that relationship. So I want to be the kind of leader that I show up. I mean, things like, are you on time? I know it's kind of like back to basics 101 of leadership, but there are a lot of people I've worked with that they can't show up for anything on time, and I'm paying them or we're paying them, and their respectability and credibility goes down over time because they don't follow through in their commitments. So when COVID hit, you'll remember the whole delivery time got messed up. You guys know what I'm talking about? Amazon got way off, and it would take like 4 weeks to get soap and a month and a half to get a new t-shirt. Well, delivery time matters. Now Amazon's back on with delivery time, and they have a reputation for how fast they deliver. You and I, as leaders, have a reputation for delivery. And I want to ask you, what's your delivery reputation? Some of us are unintentionally undermining our leadership because we are making follow-through an afterthought. Pay attention to your words and manage expectations with time. Monitor your commitments and ask the question. Perhaps even this would be a great question for you to talk about with your team. What is my reputation as a leader for delivery? When I say I'm going to do something, how do you perceive it? And do you believe that I'll deliver on time? Hey, if we can pay attention to these two things, it will make a massive difference. We're going to continue in the next episode to dial into 2 more practical ways or easy ways to destroy your credibility as a leader. I want to encourage you to take this content, discuss it with your team, put it into action, develop some things that you can do, and let's pay attention to how we're treating people. Let's pay attention to our commitments as leaders and watch as we do these 2 things, our credibility grow. This has been the continuation of part 2 of the Echo Leadership Podcast. We look forward to continuing our conversation together. We hope that you'll join us for the next episode.